get introduced, but I don't think he needs to be introduced. So we're just going to get on with some questions, and we'll eventually get to questions from the audience. So try to think of a question you think he's never had before. I think I got one. I got 4 pages of questions, and I think there's one. He might not have been asked yet. But let's start by, so last night he was awarded the Robert Kirsch Award for Lifetime Achievement. So what does that mean to you to get that, talking about lifetime achievements and things?
When you think of the badass, endurance-minded, variegated style reader that Robert Kirsch was, never knew the man from Adam, died the year before I published my first book. And you think of a lifetime of reading, too, his lifetime and mine, and he was a generation and a half older than me and an East Coaster, whereas I'm from LA here. As I said in my speech last night, I'm just a dipshit kid who loves to read. And given the august Mr. Kirsch's history with reading, the scholarship of literature, it was the most significant and pertinent award that I've ever received.
Cool. So, you're an LA guy, but you're also kind of LA's prodigal son. You've gone away, you've written about this place from Connecticut, Colorado, Kansas, Northern California. Why is that? Is it because of the haunting memories for you here, or is this the kind of place you got to get far away from to get your arms around?
No, women kept divorcing me. And I kept having to blow town. That's it. And LA, I either leave LA because a woman divorced me, or I come back to it for that same reason. There's really no more design than that.
Really? So your books, we have the LA Quartet, the Underworld USA series, we're in another LA Quartet. How did that happen? Like this idea that this theme is going to take me 4 books to write, this one's going to take 3 books. Was it just organic and maybe publishers called these the LA Quartet and so forth? Or, you know, how do you see your planning of how you're writing, what you're going to write?
I'd written a series of police procedural novels contemporaneously, immediately preceding the Black Dahlia. I wrote the Black Dahlia. The book was published in '87. It was a big hit. I'd already started the sequel, The Big Knower, because I never wanted to write another contemporaneously set novel again, ever. And so the LA Quartet, the Black Dahlia, The Big Knower, LA Confidential, NY Jazz, LA, my smog-bound fatherland, where we are right now from 1943 to 1959. The Underworld USA trilogy, I didn't want to write strictly LA set books anymore. I wanted to write big novels of America's political underbelly. Hence American Tabloid, set from 58 up to the Kennedy assassination in 63. The Cold 6000, which goes from 63 to 68, goes to Vietnam, goes all over the world, goes up to the Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy assassinations. And then the big wrap-up book, my most romantic novel, Blood's a Rover, takes us up to 72, right at the cusp of Watergate.
But it shows like a master plan. Is that what you're saying? You have a master plan?
I plot, I plan, I write enormous...
Is it by like decades?
Pardon me?
By decades, this book will be this decade, cover this decade?
I know going in the basic plot of the several books and the time frame and the historical events that I will co-opt and remain factually adherent to, and the factual events that I will deliberately distort. The proportion is 75% distortion, 25% fact. The question I never answer is, what's real and what's not? I'm out to create a reckless verisimilitude and make you believe it's all true.
So let's talk about this. This is your most recent book.
Yeah!
Widespread Panic. I think it's my favorite of your books, and it has its roots all the way back in the American tabloid and so forth. But what I think people will be interested to hear about is how this book was literally researched more than 30 years ago when you were hanging around with a guy named Freddie Otash, who it was like the TMZ of the 50s. And why don't you talk a little bit about that? To me, it's like kind of staggering that you're hanging around this guy, getting his stories. I mean, you should tell this, not me. But then 30 years later, there's a book, and it's the confessions, basically, of Freddie Otash.
Yeah, and I'll say at the outset that the book is comedy. Freddie's up in purgatory doing penance for all the people he over when he was a dirt digger for Confidential magazine in the 50s, ex-LA cop, private eye, doper of racehorses, strong-arm goon, freelance extortionist. He had all the major gay bathhouses hot-wired 24 hours a day on the off chance that Rock Hudson and some of his pals would come in and cavort. He had hotel suites and high-end ones all over LA hot-wired. He had every car park guy, busboy and bellboy in LA on his payroll, and it was the dirt, the skank, and the skinny, and it was all true, because that's how Confidential skirted, in the scandal rag heyday, the specter of defamation suits. And if you threaten to sue the magazine, Freddie'd kick your ass. Generally with the help of a couple of his goons, because Freddie was, in his heart, a chicken. And then my new novel, which Connolly will publish in September, which is called The Enchanters, is the tragic Freddie Otash. No scandal rag magazine chit-chat, no alliterative slang. Freddie's on the skids, he's been on the skids, and he's there when the cops find Marilyn Monroe's body, but it's not a Marilyn Monroe book. It's something bigger and more sinister than that.
But, you know, as you say, he's a sack of shit, but by the end of this book, you're kind of cheering for him.
Yeah, you dig him.
You're riding with him.
Yeah, you dig him.
And that's the magic of why I think this is my favorite book of yours.
Yeah.
And are you aware of that as you're writing it? That like
Yeah.
that this guy's gonna connect with the reader, even though he's doing all this nefarious shit?
Yeah, absolutely. And I had fun lampooning cultural figures I despise. James Dean, the jive auteur Nicholas Ray, his overpraised movie, Rebel Without a Cause. I take it to the cleaners. Carol Chessman, the red light bandit, who burned in the gas chamber at San Quentin Prison in 1960 for a series of kidnap rapes in 1947 and 48, and I'm glad he burned. He never killed anybody. They fried his ass and he richly deserved it. There's some guys that just gotta go, and Carol Chessman was one of them. So puncturing the myth of Chessman's victimhood felt good. Yeah, I had fun with it because Freddie's a bad guy, and James Dean and his leather bar coterie and Nick Ray are worse.
I think there's a level of satire in a lot of your books, but not to this extent. Would you agree?
Yeah, Michael, you're right. This is pure satire.
And is it easier to write or more difficult?
The first draft, once I got it done, because it's in scandal language there, and making everything match alliteratively down to the syllable is a tremendous first draft challenge. It was deliberately over the top from purgatory on up, and I rose to the occasion. Then refining the scandal language became difficult.
You put out a book like this, which I think is your masterpiece. I just think it's the best book that you've written, or the one that connected with me the most. And now you get a Lifetime Achievement Award. I'm just wondering, do you, this might be an uncomfortable question because it's somewhat from me. You're a few years older than me, and I have growing anxiety about not having enough time to finish what I want to do.
Right.
And I noticed this book may be one of your shorter ones in the last 3 decades. And I'm just wondering, how are you feeling about that? And now they're handing you Lifetime Achievement Awards. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Yeah, well, I'm 75, and I'm still quite immature, and I like to describe myself as lean, mean, obscene, and barely into my teens. My energy is in no way flagging, and the new book, The Enchanters, the summer of '62 tragicotash book, came in so strong that Alfred Akinoff, my editor there, Edward Kastenmeier, Andrew Wiley, my agent, were so high on it and so much believed the book is my best that I ditched my idea for the second LA Quartet after 2 volumes, Perfidia and the Storm, my 2 huge novels of the grave injustice of the Japanese internment, Perfidia, this storm, set from Pearl Harbor to May of '62, and turned it into a quintet. The first book, The Enchanters, the summer of '62. The second book, which I've started now, goes from October of '62 through to Thanksgiving. The third book will form, so it's a quintet in its entirety, a micro-history of LA '62, and here's how I justify the first 2 LA set volumes. All the '62 set books, and there will be 3 of them, reference events of World War II and the immediate post-war era. The resolution, this gives virtually nothing away, of the Enchanters has to do with the big LAVD epidemic after World War II. And the next 2 books will heavily reference the Japanese internment, which is a big historical fixation of mine.
Right.
Hence, LA, World War II, LA, 1962. It's really all one narrative and all one story. And I will live to finish it. Yeah!